You wanted the best. You've got the best podcast, the hottest podcast in the world. The Chris Voss Show, the preeminent podcast with guests so smart you may experience serious brain bleed. Get ready. Strap yourself in. Keep your hands, arms, and legs inside the vehicle at all times, because you're about to go on a monster education roller coaster with your brain. Now, here's your host, Chris Voss.
Wait. Is the host me? Is it me? Is it me this time? Hey guys, this is Chris Voss. They just handed me this thing. It says, you are the host. And that's been passed to me. So welcome to the show, folks. We certainly appreciate you guys. The ChrisVossShow.com. I guess I have to do that. Hey, we have an amazing journalist from the Wall Street Journal on today. We have some great journalists from the Wall Street Journal if you go look at our roster over there. So we're just slowly working our way through every journalist possible as they write books. We always have to wait for them to write books. I don't know why. They never come on just to shoot the crap, but you know, they're always invited on to just shoot the poop anytime they want. They don't have to write a book to get on the show. We love journalists. And he's calling in from France. So we're going to be talking about Paris and maybe some other things. Or maybe we'll just talk about his book, one of those two. Anyway, guys, we'll be talking about that. Be sure to refer the show to your friends, neighbors, relatives. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, youtube.com/Chris Voss. Every place that the Chris Voss Show or Chris Voss is at, go see my speaking courses, consulting from ChrisVossLeadershipInstitute.com. And you can learn everything about us over there. We have a new hottest author. He's got a book coming out on August 9th. You're going to check this out. Order it up so you can be the first in your book club to read it. The title of the book is called Boundless, The Rise and Fall and Escape of Carlos Ghosn. It's coming out August 9th. It's written by the Wall Street Journal's Nick Kosto and Sean McLean. And we have one of them on the show that we were graced by. I guess the other one is in Japan. So we won't be talking to him. He's probably in bed right now. But Nick is with us. Nick has worked for the Wall Street Journal since 2015, covering business and finance from Paris. During that time, he has broken news on some of the biggest corporate stories in Europe. He's a graduate of the University College of London, and he lives in Paris. Welcome to the show, Nick. How are you?
Yeah, very well. Thank you. Thanks very much for having me on.
Thanks for coming on. And you're over in France time. What time is it in the morning over there or night?
7 p.m. actually.
7 p.m. There you go. We're catching you in the working late, burning the midnight hours. So give us your congratulations on the new book. Give us your .coms where people can maybe look you up on the interwebs and find out more about you.
Sure. So I'm on Twitter, Nick_Kosto at twitter.com. And I'm also on LinkedIn if you want to follow me on there. And I have an author page, obviously, at the Wall Street Journal.
The Wall Street Journal, I've heard of that.
Yeah. Big newspaper.
Yeah. I've been reading it since I was 18, I think, or something like that. Wow. Always good. So what motivated you to write this book? Why did you pick up the topic and what was like, this is something I need to write about?
Great question. I mean, first of all, this was a big corporate story. So because of my job, I covered this from, the day of Carlos Ghosn's kind of surprise arrest in Japan, all the way through kind of his detention when he got let out on bail, and then his crazy escape from Japan in a box where he kind of then escaped to Lebanon, where he's living as an international fugitive. So I was covering that every step of the way. Sean, obviously in Japan, was doing it with me. And we just got to the point where, I mean, it is just an incredible story. And if you keep writing kind of 800-word articles, 600-word articles, 2,000-word articles, there's a point that comes where that's just not enough. And the arc of the story was amazing. It was so rich. We had an incredible character. We had governments involved. We had kind of former special forces getting him out of Japan. It is just the best story that I've ever come across in my journalism career. And so at some point, in fact, it was pretty soon after the escape, we just thought, we have to write a book here. we just need to get it done.
So give us an overview of who this guy is. I'm sure this story will start ringing some bells because this was quite extraordinary.
Yeah, it's an extraordinary story. So this guy, Carlos Ghosn, he was one of the very, very, very top executives in the world, kind of the face of Davos, the first man to be CEO of not one, but two Fortune 500 companies. Mm-hmm. Nobody had ever attempted to do that before. So he was head of Nissan, so he would spend kind of half of his life as Nissan CEO, and then he would fly to France and spend the other half of his life as Renault CEO.
Wow.
So, a guy who for years turned around companies and could seemingly do no wrong. People kind of hung off his every word. He would whine about the global economy, about politics, about all sorts of things. And he was just one of a big face of, but that was it. And we certainly, there was such a large part of the story which we had no idea about, and which started coming out obviously after his arrest.
Yeah. And this guy, he had an interesting childhood. Tell us a little bit about his childhood.
Yeah, I mean, this is again something which was kind of hidden in plain sight for all these years where he was such a well-known corporate executive, was his interesting childhood. So he was born in the Amazon rainforest in Brazil, tiny little village called Portobello. So he was there for a while, and then he moved to Lebanon, his ancestral homeland where his family's from. And in Lebanon, he attended a good school, but there was a huge scandal, basically, that was on the front pages of all the newspapers at the time, where his dad was accused of killing a priest, and in fact convicted of killing a priest, when Carlos Ghosn was just 6 years old. And so his dad, initially was sentenced to death. This was then, on appeal, it was commuted to a 15-year sentence because the killing was ruled an accident. But, this kind of made Carlos Ghosn, it's an extremely formative experience for him, obviously. When your dad is kind of convicted for killing a priest when you're 6 years old, and that's all over the front pages of the newspapers. So he would go visit him growing up, but he was kind of like the man of the house from a very young age, surrounded by sisters and his mother and his grandmother.
Hi, folks. Here's Voss here with a little station break. Hope you're enjoying the show so far. We'll resume here in a second. I'd like to invite you to come to my coaching, speaking, and training courses website. You can also see our new podcast over there at chrisvossleadershipinstitute.com. Over there, you can find all the different stuff that we do for speaking engagements if you'd like to hire me, training courses that we offer, and coaching for leadership, management, entrepreneurism, podcasting, corporate stuff. With over 35 years of experience in business and running companies as CEO, I think I can offer a wonderful breadth of information and knowledge to you, or anyone that you want to invite me to for your company. Thanks for tuning in. We certainly appreciate you listening to the show, and be sure to check out chrisvossleadershipinstitute.com. Now back to the show.
But yes, super interesting childhood. Also in Lebanon, we don't get that many kind of corporate titans who are from Lebanon or from similar countries. So for all these reasons, he kind of had a different outlook to a lot of other CEOs that certainly I've come across.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was quite extraordinary. I mean, I don't think a lot of people knew who he was, and then all of a sudden there was a story of him being expatriated out of Japan, and so he ends up in a bit of a quandaries over there. I mean, he, like you mentioned, he's a huge successful CEO, but tease out some of the different things where he gets himself in trouble and ending up on the wrong side of the law.
Yeah, so what's quite interesting is, so Carlos Ghosn, obviously, he turned around or helped to turn around Renault, his first company. Then he turned around Nissan, his second company. Now he's in charge of both companies. And he feels like he should be paid like an American CEO. One thing that he was, that he would tell or he'd even tell journalists off the record, but he'd tell like all of his colleagues, listen, I'm being underpaid. I'm underpaid compared to the person at GM. I'm underpaid compared to the person at Fiat Chrysler or wherever. I should be getting more money. The problem is, obviously, in France and in Japan, the corporate culture is not to pay like you do in America, right? Mm-hmm. And he's head of a French company and a Japanese company. And so, if he's getting $30 million a year paychecks, there's going to be like outrage. And so he's forced to accept, I guess, a French paycheck and a Japanese paycheck, which is already a lot of money. But he tries to look in secret at how he could maybe stay at those companies whilst also being paid like an American CEO, but not telling the shareholders, obviously not telling the public. He doesn't want to deal with the backlash.
Wow.
And so what we see is he begins to defer his compensation, sign some agreements. This is what he's originally arrested for. And then what we find out after he's in jail for a while is that there's also kind of tens of millions of dollars that seem to be, I mean, he denies this to this day, but they seem to be transiting from his companies through Oman and into his pocket. And we know throughout these years, because he was open about it, that he felt underpaid. And we also know now that he looked at all of these ways to make up that shortfall. And so that's how he starts to get himself in trouble, essentially, in a simple form. And so one day he lands in Japan and he basically just gets arrested at the airport.
Wow. Did he know he was going to get arrested? Was it a surprise to him?
No, he would never have gone to Japan if he knew he was going to get arrested. I mean, basically, he just gets off because he had a private jet, which he used to go between the various operations of his company, as well as some exotic holidays. But the private jet lands, he goes up to the passport, gives over his passport, as he always did. And they say, look, there's a problem. And at this stage, he basically just gets put into a van, taken to Kosuge prison. Mm-hmm. And what's crazy, actually, through this story, one thing that we did learn about a lot was the Japanese justice system. And so he gets taken to this jail, and we don't hear from Carlos Ghosn for 3 weeks.
Wow.
At the beginning, he doesn't have a lawyer. We don't even know whether he denied the charges. It's even hard to know what the charges are. And it's total silence. And he's just basically, in solitary confinement in the Japanese jail. And so he has gone from the top of the business world, the Davos jet set, to, on his own in a cell in a Japanese jail.
Basically a self-made billionaire, right?
Yeah, well, I think he was getting there. He was certainly a self-made multi-millionaire, but it seems, we kind of, had access to some notes inside his phone, and it did seem that he was tallying up his wealth and that the goal was to become a self-made billionaire. Wow.
So greed is good. I mean, the funny thing about this story is he'd be just fine if he lived in, oligarchy America. This is a pittance or something of what we pay CEOs now.
Well, he often said, I did ask him once, I was like, do you have any regrets or any? And he said, I wish I had taken the General Motors job.
There you go.
Rather than stay at the Japanese and French company and then try and find all these schemes to try and make up the shortfall and get myself into trouble, just take the GM job. And I think that would have solved a lot of problems. But at the same time, the guy was revered in Japan. He was feared, if not loved, in France, and maybe he had some freedom and some latitude at these companies that he wouldn't have had as an American CEO with a tough board of directors. And there was certainly also some positives to being head of a Japanese and a French company. Didn't want to give up.
This is a story, I'd seen the thing where he'd been I don't know what the right word is, extracted. Extracted, but that's not right. Extracted from the Japan. You're like, what the hell? And then there was some American mercenaries, or I don't know if you call them mercenaries, but there was some American security, quote unquote, people who got involved. And I think some of them are in trouble, aren't they?
Yeah. So, this is also, the whole thing is crazy. The whole thing is a crazy story, but they've essentially swapped places with Ghosn. This is trading places because they came back to the US. So it's a father and son. The father was a security consultant and, obviously agreed to do this, involved his son, and they came back to the US, and the US has an extradition treaty with Japan. So they were arrested one morning at their house, taken to a jail in Massachusetts, went through a whole court case, sent over to Japan, convicted. They actually confessed, made an apology, bowed. And now they're in Japan and they're in a Japanese jail. And actually, when they flew to Japan for the first time, they were put in the exact same jail that Ghosn had been held in.
Wow.
So they're now serving I think the father's got a 2.5-year sentence or something, and the son, slightly shorter one, but they're big sentences.
How many years or how much money did they make for that, the father and son?
Yeah, great question. I have to say that I don't know entirely. What we do know is that there was an $800,000 payment made by Ghosn to these guys before the escape. There was then a $500,000 payment made after the escape. So we're at $1.3 million. Obviously, with that, they've got to hire a private jet, buy a box, etc. But what I don't know, what they claimed that was it. They claimed there was no more money. What I don't know is whether that claim is true. They claim.
Sounds like he was pretty good at moving money around, hiding money, so there could be like a trust somewhere or something.
Exactly. We don't know what the agreement is, once they get out of Japan.
That's just crazy, man. I don't know. Would you go to jail would you go to jail in Japan for 3 years for $1 million?
1.3 million? No way. Also because, as I said, you've got expenses out of that. So you've got to hire the private jet.
That's true.
There's a bunch of other things. And the other thing to say about Michael Taylor, who's the guy who got him out, is he was living a comfortable life in Massachusetts. He wasn't. Yeah. It's not like he needed the money.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he was doing totally fine. He had a vitamin water business.
Was this one of those? He seemed like he was kind of like one of those macho dudes who makes one too many gun videos. I don't know that he does that, but you know what I mean. Just that sort of guy.
Yeah.
He's
an incredible character, like super complicated. Because he's a guy I've met a number. He's got a big heart, genuinely a big heart, Michael Taylor. And I think what he thought that Ghosn was being wronged. What he once said to me was, I didn't see this any differently as getting him out of North Korea. I just thought the guy was being wrong. And that's what Ghosn kept saying, and that's what Ghosn kept saying. And so, he does the job. The other thing to say about Michael Taylor is he had worked in security for a while. Then he got involved in a scheme and pleaded guilty to some charges of basically defrauding the American government over like an Afghanistan contract back in 2012. So he went to jail for a bit, got out, and he was doing vitamin water and stuff like that. But that's just not going to keep your blood pumping if you've had the career that Michael Taylor had, which was crazy.
Yeah.
And so I think also when he gets that call from Lebanon, basically saying, "Do you want to help out Carlos Ghosn?" It's hard to say no. It's hard to resist that excitement, right?
And this story is just extraordinary. Like if you watch this, you'd be like, this could be a Hollywood movie. It probably will end up as a Hollywood movie off your book. But he's having wife problems with the divorce. He's using all this way to move money around. He has an affair.
I know, yeah.
It was just like everything goes off the rails completely for this guy. And then they didn't even check the box. They were loading onto a private plane. I guess that was an oversight or something that took place, if I recall rightly.
I mean, the thing is with like security for private jets is it's not that tight because most people who fly in private jets are not going to blow up their own planes. So basically you get a form which says, would you like a security check? And they tick the box no. And so if you actually look at the CCTV, which is of them getting onto, going through security, there's just like an airport worker who wheels the box next to the thing that's supposed to beep, next to the metal detector. Then one of the two guys walks through the metal detector, set it off. So the metal detector goes off. Nobody does anything. They just keep walking onto the plane. And the other guy walks next to it. And that's it. That was the security check. So there was never any, there was never any chance.
And what the guy hit the box? He have like an oxygen tank or something air holes?
Yeah, there was 70 air holes. So what Michael Taylor had done, who was the former Green Beret Special Forces guy, he just drilled these 70 holes in the bottom. So Ghosn's mouth was kind of next to it. And he could, and what he'd done was wheeled it around his house just to check that it was still strong enough and that Ghosn, that his arm wouldn't fall out or something like that.
Wow.
So yeah, he had some help.
A human being transported.
It's totally crazy.
And then they go
the simplicity of it all, I think, right? It's like, how do you get out of Japan? We'll just get in the box.
Just get in a box and pull the hell out.
And it's genius in a way.
Yeah. Plus, you don't have to pay for a plane ticket or a seat ticket, that extra seat fee. You don't have to wait in the line. You just get right in the box. I think I'm going to start traveling that way. You skip the TSA line and stuff, you don't have to deal with being felt up. And then he goes to Lebanon, where I guess there's no extradition treaty with Japan. Is he wanted by Interpol now? So if he ever leaves Lebanon?
Yeah, exactly. So he can't leave Lebanon. So he's wanted by Interpol. So Japan requested an Interpol Red Notice, it's called. And France has also requested an Interpol Red Notice because they also, have been looking into this kind of money flow through the Middle East. And the French have concluded that indeed he stole millions from Renault, as the Japanese have concluded that he stole millions from Nissan. In the same way, actually, with the same money loop. So yeah, he's got a red notice. He can't leave Lebanon, but as long as he stays in Lebanon, there's just nothing. There's nothing the French can do. There's nothing the Japanese can do. They're kind of like in this holding pattern. Potentially forever, because they're literally, if Lebanon doesn't extradite its citizens, I don't know what they can do.
Do you remember was it Mark Rich? Do you remember the Mark Rich guy? When I was growing up when I was 18, I believe it was Mark Rich, M-A-R-C. Clinton pardoned him, but I remember growing up, and it was during the era of Ivan Bielski, and that's when I first started reading the Wall Street Journal. Was during the Greed is Good days, the Michael Milk and stuff. That tells you how old I am. But he was a international commodities trader, hedge fund manager, a businessman, and he escaped. The U.S. government was prosecuting him for something, and he escaped to, I believe, Sweden. And at the time, Sweden, I think, didn't have an extradition treaty, or he paid the over there, a filthy, enormous amount of money. I remember for decades they were trying to get to him, U.S. government, and then finally he got Clinton pardoned.
Really?
And it was a big scandal for one of Clinton's pardons because he'd basically been not really bought off. That's right. I don't want to get sued by the Clintons, but it was scandalous. I think that's the right word, scandalous, because there was some money that transferred into some political accounts. Maybe I don't remember exactly. But yeah, Mark Rich. I remember he was, the U.S. government can get to him. Sweden wouldn't extradite him. I believe it was Sweden that he was hiding in. But yeah, it reminded me a bit of that story. Can they send in a? They can't have one of those CIA-like teams go in and extricate him.
Yeah,
anything like that.
I remember going to see Ghosn in Lebanon in the days after his escape and talking to him about it. He was totally worried about it because I remember him saying that there were some Japanese who had, moved in across the street and the people looking at his house, and he thought that maybe he would get snatched back and taken back to Japan. I mean, it all seems very unlikely. He does still have bodyguards.
Wow.
And I know that it's something that he's worried about in the past. It does seem unlikely for a country to set that up. I mean, they kind of have to follow the rules. But to your point about the Clinton administration, it's also, Japan is still extremely angry about this. About what he said about the Japanese justice system, about him just basically leaving the country, saying he'd attend trial and not doing it. I know France is pretty angry about this. I wouldn't say they're as angry as Japan, but the chances of them ever forgiving Ghosn, I think are zero.
So you got to interview him quite a bit.
Yeah, got to interview him quite a bit. Also because I interviewed him even before we wrote the book. As I say, we decided to write the book after the escape. I got to interview him.
Wow.
Before that too, got to spend some time with him. He's an impressive guy. You spend an hour with him, you don't see the time go by. He's got a lot of charisma. He's very intense. He gets straight to the point. And frankly, on most of the stuff, he was pretty forthcoming. In my opinion, he was good. He was good with me. The only topic that he was not forthcoming on, and that he would not really go into, was the money loop through a man that seemed to end up in his own pocket. That he has never been expansive about. He didn't, there's a French judge who flew to Lebanon to interview him about it. He didn't answer the questions. He didn't answer the questions to the Japanese. Sorry, he didn't answer journalist questions. So he's never explained what this money that seems to leave the companies and then ends up in his pocket. And by the way, he bought a yacht with it. Every good financial crime story has to have a yacht. But yeah, that was the one topic where he kind of just said, no comment.
Can he go on the yacht? I mean, if it's parked in Lebanese international waters, if you go in international waters, you're open to it.
It's funny. I mean, so this yacht is now at the center of a dispute, obviously, because Nissan says, well, you bought the yacht with Nissan money, therefore it's our yacht. And Ghosn says, no, it's my yacht. I bought it, I basically got it through my, et cetera, it's my yacht. And so this yacht is moored in Lebanon until they sort out, but it's registered in the British Virgin Islands. So the court case is happening in the British Virgin Islands, and we'll see what happens. But you can track yachts. There are lots of people have been doing it with the oligarchs recently. So there's lots of websites that allow you to track yachts. And I did see that the yacht had been moving up and down the coast of Lebanon. Whether Carlos Ghosn was on it or not, I haven't.
Wow.
But interesting that it does seem to.
Yeah. How old is he now?
Very late 60s. 68 maybe 68.
Yeah. So he's just basically retiring Lebanon. You can probably pay off lots of people in Lebanon. I don't know. I imagine that's how things work in that country, from what I understand. You just have to make sure somebody doesn't snatch you in one of those black helicopter CIA sort of things, and you just chill. It does have to be kind of interesting. I don't know if you've asked him this, but what would it be like to have that much money, that much power, and you can't really go anywhere with it? You know what I mean? Like
he says, it's super interesting. I mean, I've spoken to him about his life, and he says he's really happy. So
Yeah, he's lived it already.
But even now, he says he's happy now that, he needs to take a step back. Now, one thing that I haven't mentioned, that he's living in a house that was bought for him by Nissan, and which Nissan says is theirs. So they're trying to evict him from his house.
Oh,
So
serious?
That's
Wow.
court case. There's so many court cases going on for sure. Anyway.
And he's really thumbed his nose to the Japanese justice system. I mean, he's been outright. From what I've seen, he's just been outright. Yeah, F you, I got away.
People. Basically, like his line, his favorite line is, "I did not escape justice, I escaped injustice." It's something like that. So
it's crazy.
But I look at his life now, like he's so much smaller than he used to be. He used to circumnavigate the globe on his private jet. Everybody knew who he was. He made a ton of money, and now he's like a small Lebanese kind of investor businessman in Lebanon. Can't leave. He plays a lot of bridge. And Beirut is tiny. Like, I've spent a lot of time in Beirut. Everybody knows everyone. He can't go anywhere without being recognized, and it's kind of uncomfortable. I mean, it's fine. It's better than a Japanese jail, right? Yeah. But it's a long way from what he had before. Yeah. And his issue is, and I know lots of people think that he should, as best he can, come to France, face up to the charges. Let's say he gets convicted. Let's say he does a few years. Is that better to then be free and be able to go back and live the big life that you wanted to live, right? Rather than living as a kind of international fugitive in Lebanon? I don't know. It's a genuine question.
Yeah. Well, it's an extraordinary book, extraordinary story. Somebody's got to put it to film, so I'm sure somebody optioned your book. So,
I think so.
Anything more you want to tease out of the book before we go?
Again, I've spent a lot of time on Carlos Ghosn, and I wouldn't have done if I didn't find the guy as fascinating as I do. Yeah. I think he had enormous qualities, huge qualities. One of the businessmen with the biggest qualities I've ever come across. He also had big flaws, and we've ended up with this kind of amazing kind of Greek tragedy of a story, which people will read, and I hope that people won't come to like easy judgments about Carlos Ghosn. That was certainly my goal when writing it. That it's complex, and this kind of guy who grew up without a father and who came from Lebanon and who kind of like made it to the top of the business world through his. Through all of these qualities that we've been talking about, and then had this kind of like flaw, this hubris that kind of brought him down. I mean, it's an age-old story, but it's just, I found it fascinating. I found him fascinating. I enjoyed the whole project. So I hope people will enjoy the book.
Yeah. Enjoy the book, and it'll probably end up as a movie. It has to end up as a movie. I mean, the whole play out of escaping in the box. I mean, that's happy here right there. Suspense, and
it's so good.
And just crazy times. Did you get a chance to interview the bounty guy, the guy who's the mercenary, basically?
Yeah, I did. I did meet him a few times. Yeah, I did.
What's his attitude these days in jail? Is he like, do the time, do the crime? I still got paid.
No, he's the thing about Michael Taylor as well. Like, again, I met him a few times. He can't sit still. He's always up. He's doing things. He needs to talk. He wants to help people. And so, like, sitting in a Japanese jail, I can imagine would be total torture for him.
Total hell.
He still thinks that from everything he knows, Ghosn was being mistreated and he saved a hostage. That's his line. And so he is very bitter. He's not the healthiest. He's in his 60s himself. So he's extremely, extremely bitter about being in jail. The other thing he's bitter about is that he served in the US Army, right? He was a former Green Beret, and he is extremely bitter that his country would extradite him to Japan, knowing what the justice system is like over there. So he's certainly not sitting there thinking, I'm glad I did it. Actually, he never thought he would get extradited. He never thought he would do time for this. I'm not even sure he thought he would ever get caught. I think he thought he would do it, not tell anyone, and then move on.
Wow.
And the consequences have been severe for him and his son. That's probably the worst bit of it, that his son is also.
That's true. You get your son involved in your crap. I mean, I've seen these mercenary type dudes. In fact, we've had one person on the show who doesn't really do that line of work, but he helps find people. His job is to find people. And like Lebanon is one place that he pulls people out of, and different things. So if somebody comes up missing, kidnapped, somebody grabs a wife, and takes them. He has ways of finding people and getting them expatriated.
Yeah, well, that's what Michael Taylor would do. I wonder if was it Michael Taylor you had on the?
No, he wrote a book called 20 Hours in Lebanon or something. I'd have to Google it up on the show. We had him on a couple of years ago, but he finds people, and so it's quite extraordinary. But he does it in it's legal from a U.S. aspect sense, but it's probably not legal in countries because I believe they do a grab where they have to do a Merc grab or something. I think I'd have to go back and read it. But
look, Mike Taylor says, one thing when he's rescued, for example, kids from the Middle East or whatever, he basically says it's times when the U.S. government can't really do anything, and they kind of give him a wink and a nudge, and they say, "Listen, we can't do anything, but maybe you can." And so he kind of does it. He feels, or he says, with the tacit approval of the U.S. government. And so in this case, obviously, he didn't have the tacit approval of anyone. Went out on a limb and just did his thing.
Went out on a limb and did his thing. I'll have to look up who the book was that came on the story. But, this has got to end up to a movie. I mean, somebody's got to turn this into a movie because it definitely should be optioned for one. So thank you very much for coming on the show. We really appreciate it. And just a intriguing story. And I'm sure there'll be probably some more, intriguing things that come out as this thing progresses through the courts in his life. And, it's really interesting, but I'll consider traveling in the future in a box. That sounds like a safer way to go, a funner way to go. I don't know, maybe. At least I won't have to sit next to someone and get COVID. I don't know. There you go. So thank you for coming on the show, Nick. We really appreciate it, man.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. Thanks so much, Chris.
There you go. Well, and thanks for tuning in. Go order the book. You definitely want to get it. It'll be available August 9th, 2022. Boundless, The Rise, Fall, and Escape of Carlos Ghosn. You definitely want to read about this. I mean, you read it, and you're just like, wait, this is real? Like this sounds like some novel someone made up. So there you go. Real life story of real life events. Thanks for tuning in. Go to youtube.com/Chris Voss. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss. All our groups on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, all those places the crazy kids are playing these days. Thanks for tuning in. Be good to each other. Stay safe. We'll see you guys next time.